Welcome to this class on aspects about organization and overhead costs. We are within the technical analysis. We have dealt with the aspects related to product and production, and now we're considering the fact that, as we said already since the beginning, the investment is going to be hosted by a company. So we have to consider the organizational aspects on one hand and the indirect costs connected to the investment. As the outline shows us, we're starting with aspects related to human resources planning issues, and then we will consider the plan organization and the overhead related costs. The topic includes the fact that for starting up the project, we do need to hire qualified personnel, and we have to consider the other additional resources that the company is implying for the project itself. Let's start with the human resources planning issues. About human resources, the project plan should include analysis of personnel required to operate the enterprise. So, since we started from the consideration that whatever project is by definition an organizational activity, and any organizational activity could be supported by technology and machinery, as we've seen, but requires inherently the employment of human resources, then we have to plan very carefully these aspects as well. Human resources planning is about personnel, and this personnel might be local or expatriate. Now, if we consider international activities, we might refer to the local personnel which is operating in the country or the region or the area where we're investing, as well as the expatriate, which are foreign managers already hired by the company and deployed in a different area. So those managers probably are already active in the organizational environment, and they're going to be moved in a different geographic area. We will consider the requirements in terms of phase and classification of personnel. We will consider the qualifications meant as the ensemble of skills which we're going to require to these human resources. We will deal with the availability, both in quantitative and qualitative terms. And then we will proceed in a more detailed way on planning activities and aspects related to additional elements, such as job descriptions. A job description is the clarification of responsibility and tasks which are required for the personnel. Qualifications might be encoded in the job descriptions too. Recruitment methods, we could have local personnel versus expatriate personnel. We could refer to the local job market versus the foreign job market. We could refer to e-recruitment if we consider the internet as a media for recruiting people as well, or we have face-to-face interviews. We could have direct recruitment of personnel, or we might refer to talent scouts or headhunters in order to acquire such personnel. Another aspect which is very important is related to labor union relations. So, when it comes to unions, the company should consider different kinds of negotiating habits between the company itself and the workers, or better, between the company itself and the representatives of the worker, which are the unions. So from country to country, from cultural environment to cultural environment, exigencies and methods may differ from one area to the other. Resolution of disputes, it's about the judicial system which is governing the relations between the company and the individuals. So each labor contract has to specify what is the judicial representative in case of disputes, and what is the trial that both parties should refer in order to clarify the situation. And then we have to consider the dismissal practices as well. So if we consider a project having a beginning and an end, then we have to consider also how to lay off personnel and other activities at the end of the project itself. Additionally, we should consider the productivity standards. So again, if we consider different geographic areas, we might have different cultural and climatic conditions, as well as different cultural conditions related to productivity. So in extremely cold or warm areas, the productivity could be different from average situations in the rest of the world. So it's very dangerous to some extent and risky for the project to consider some average standards and assume that all over the world these kind of standards might be considered fixed. Language abilities. This is crucial, most of all when the headquarters, the company, and the local facility, they do refer to a different language. But even though they refer to the same language, let's say English, different communities and different populations might use the same words with different meanings, the same phrases with different emphasis. So it's very important to consider the language abilities as an aspect to be carefully planned in this part of the project. Social infrastructure, it's another known element. It's about the health system, it's about the safety of a place, it's about the schooling system, things like that. So when it comes to personnel and its employment within the company, it's very important to refer to the social infrastructure as well as an element that could enhance or constrain the chance to have a profitable investment. Wages and salaries, as well as the benefits package, they are part of the scheme by which, using the metaphor of the stick and carrot, we could stimulate individual behaviors, meaning that if our objectives are to fix some conditions or promote some aspects like loyalty, commitment, motivations, the suite of solutions that we might find in terms of human resources policy and its elements like salaries, wages, benefits, and so on, it's very important too. So these are the aspects that should be carefully planned when we try to estimate the cost of the personnel. Then we have additional aspects related to the success or the limits that the project implementation might encounter. Characteristics of the project leader are crucial both for the investment success in general terms and for the investor's perspective too. So since the project might be led by an individual, the individual characteristics of such an actor are another element to be investigated and assessed and evaluated by the investors. So the individual profile is very important in terms of the sense of the initiative, the risk tolerance of the individual, the bravery or the ability to motivate other people or to to get empathic towards other people. So the individual profile is crucial. The second element is related to leadership qualities. So in terms of leadership, we might have different definitions of leadership. We might have different aspects that we should take in consideration. One point is that in order to have the project implemented and the actions translated into results, we need an effective leadership overall the length of the project. Knowledge and ability has to do with the specific aspects of the professional profile of the leader. So knowledge and ability might be referred to the technical requirements of the project, as well as might be shown through the resume of the leader itself, meaning that we might consider the track record of his or her previous experiences and analyze through it what is the chance that this kind of individual could have a positive impact on the project implementation. Another important element has to do with the work time utilization. So, if we consider personnel, in addition to unproductive work days, the project designer might have to consider how time is utilized in the workplace. So it's not just about the availability of personnel, it's not just about the way that this personnel is managed and led by a leader, it's also about the efficient and effective use of such a time that the company and the project have at their own disposal. So, work time utilization, small-scale machine parts manufacture might be considered as an example. So, if we have a semi-automated process, a lot of time is involved both in the interaction between the workers and the machine. And according to the operational requirements of the machine, we might have correlated usage of the time by the people. Meaning that if we have a small-scale machine parts manufacturer, then we have some setup times to be considered as well. So as we've seen during the last classes about product and production issues, the consideration of the setup times leads to the consideration of the setup costs as well. This is going to be a practical example. So let's consider a working time with 3 shifts of 8 hours. This is the 100% availability of work time resources. This is 100% availability of personnel. Now, if we break down this time schedule or this time availability of 100%, and we observe what are the technical exigencies expressed by the machine, for example, we might have the so-called scheduled breaks for 9%. We might have an additional 21% of preparatory time. This is the setup of different machines for different uses, for example. We might have 20% dedicated to the auxiliary operations, like feeding the machine with the necessary inputs, for example. 9% of maintenance and 7.5% of organizational problems. So on one hand, we might have pure technical aspects. On the other hand, we might have more organizational aspects, elements coming from the fact that we have to organize such activity. As a result, we have 34.5% of productive time. So if we deduct all those elements that we consider auxiliary to the productive time, as a result, we have then less than 40% of our time could be employed in productive activities. Now, considering that we pay for the personnel in terms of salaries, wages, benefits anyway, it's very important to enhance this ratio in order to sustain the cost effectiveness and the profitability of the project itself. Another additional element that would explain us the difference between the productive time and the result of this productivity, another way to detect such inefficiencies could be the consideration of the so-called surcharges. So when it comes to surcharges, as we will see, it's the impact of the non-working activities or the non-working time on the salary and wages that we pay for our personnel. So let's consider these unproductive work days through an example. We start from the consideration that in terms of days per year, we might have 312 days per year. And we have two cases here, case A and case B. Now, if we consider what the unproductive workday might mean, we have different elements. Let's consider these three ones. Second holiday week, other holidays, training, leave, and illness. So apart from pure holidays, which are these two, here we have the fact that the personnel is taking advantage of some rights in order not to show up at work. So if we consider case A, we have 0 for this row, -4, -2, -14, -3. For a total of 23 non-working days. Case B is more extreme since we have higher volumes here and we end up with the situation of 123 non-working days. Now, if we consider the net working days per year and we deduct these two values, 23 and 123, from 312, we end up with 269 and 189 working day, net working days per year. In terms of hours, if you consider a shift of 8 hours per day, then we have more than 2,000 on this case and 1,600 on this other case. The assumption again is that we have a 6-day work week, and so with shifts of 8 hours per day, we have 24 hours per week. Now, what is the surcharge? It's the calculation of how many people we need more in order to cover up this difference between 312 and 269. So as you might see by referring to the material and the website, if we start with an endowment of 50 people, in case A, we need 4 additional workers for implementing this project, just by considering the values on this column. Now, if we know these values on the premises, we are able to estimate what the absorption of the project might be. If we have these values, the actual ones at the end of the project or at the intervals by which the project is scheduled, then we might have rough ideas on how to deal with such elements. So, in terms of calculation, we have the surcharge as unproductive time, and the percentage surcharge of unproductive time will be estimated like this. We have 100 as a general value for having things in percentage, multiplying this ratio, which is in brackets 1 divided 1 minus percentage of non-productive hours over 100 minus 1. Now, the idea of the percentage of surcharge for unproductive time is the fact that if we pay an amount of money for salaries, the unproductive time make seem this figure more expensive for the company than expected. So Again, if you refer to the materials and the website, you might see that in the previous example, there is an increase of roughly 88% on the initial level of salaries and wages, which is the enhancement, the increase of such a number given to the unproductive time. Now, to sum up, in the estimate of human resources cost, we might have a list and the application. In terms of the list, we have the classifications, and all the personnel should be classified starting from the top managers to the least paid workers, salaries and wages, benefits and surcharges, training activities which lead to unproductive days, as we have just seen, and the recruitment analysis. So we should consider all these elements in order to estimate the human resources cost. The application might be to the planning activities, to construction, and operations. So the planning of human resources management could impact both in the planning, construction, and the operational moments of our project investment. These activities, they generate overheads, which are the additional costs, as we'll see, that the project should cover in terms of profitability. So, if we want our project to become profitable, we should think about not only the direct costs related to plants, machinery, and so on, but also the overhead costs that the project is generating. Again, we need to take in consideration administration, the production, the marketing, the sales and distribution, and the decommissioning. So all these elements, in a direct or an indirect way, are absorbing human resources. Now that we are sufficiently familiar with the idea of human resources planning, we should extend our analysis and our exposition to the overhead costs. So let's consider plant organization and overhead costs. The project requires an organization to carry out the business plan. The organization should be designed to fit the need of the enterprise. Now, we recall the idea that we need an organization in order to host the project, because only the organization could make the plan that we are considering for the project actions. Only the organization could transform ideas and objectives into actual results. The organization should fit the needs of the enterprise and the project itself. So we have different organizational models, and we need to choose those kind of solutions which are fit with our objectives. So the idea of fitness is a recursive idea in the management field. We have strategic fit, organizational fit, operational fit, and so on. In this specific context, we are referring mainly to the organizational fit, considering the objectives of the project. Again, we need to consider the organizational impacts in terms of classifications. So let's start again from the very top management to the least paid employees. We should consider the direct and indirect impact of utilization of resources on the project. By definition, we have direct impact when the project itself is absorbing resources. We have an indirect impact when it's the organization that is absorbing resources also for implementing the project. We should fix the numbers of employees, which is crucial in terms of human resources management and related overhead costs. And we need job descriptions and labor and overhead costs. So we recall again the menu of different items that we should take in consideration in order to estimate the overhead costs. At this point, we need specific tools. One tool is the organization chart. Now, let's consider this fictional organizational chart of this fictional XYZ company. So it's a whatever company. Now, the organization chart is able to show us two main elements, basically. The first element is the vertical disaggregation of activities and responsibilities, which means that through the vertical representation of responsibilities, we are able to picture what the hierarchy of authority is within a specific company. So, by description, we know by observing this organization chart that the chairman is the boss of the chief executive officer, the CEO. And consistently, the CEO is the boss of these four responsibles here. So we have a manager for production, one for the administration, one for marketing, and one for distribution. So considering that we have this structure, we have the chairman, the CEO, and four so-called line managers. So each manager at this level is responsible for one area of the company. So the first information that we are able to collect through the analysis of the organization chart is the hierarchy of authority linking different people and different organizational units within the company. By design, each rectangular structure like this is depicting the situation by which a certain responsibility is assigned to one person or to more people. So we might have personal, individual, or collective organizational units. So the first information that we recall is about the hierarchy of authority. The second information that we are able to collect through the analysis of the organization chart is the way the structure itself is designed. So if we consider the top management, the chairman and the CEO in this example, and we consider the line managers, the first line of responsibility, which is depicted at this level, we have production, administration, marketing, and distribution. So those activities are very similar to the ones that we might find in the value chain description of a whatever company or whatever venture. So since people are grouped together by the function that they carry out, this organizational structure is labeled a functional organizational structure. So within each organizational unit, we have the expression of a specific function of a company. So, for example, by adopting the same logic, within production, we have further specialized activities. So we have plant manager, a quality control manager, and a procurement manager. Within administration, we find different specifications of the administrative activities like accounting, managerial control, and cost accounting. Within marketing, we find marketing research, operational marketing, customer care. Within distribution, we find retail and contracts. Now, at the line level, we have different functions. At the second further level, we have sub-functions. So we might say that this structure is based on the functions of the company. And this structure could be labeled as a functional structure. In case we had different aggregation criteria here, saying according to the business or the specific project we were going to deploy, then we might have referred to different type or ideal type of organizational structure. So just to sum up, when it comes to the estimation of the overhead costs, if we consider this structure, we might be able to understand that we need this kind of managerial positions, and then we have to fill all these organizational units. Again, each organizational unit, depicted as a rectangular structure here, is associated to one individual responsibility or to a collective responsibility. A second tool which is very effective is the overhead cost centers. So the organization of the overhead of the company through cost centers is another way of figuring out what the overhead costs might be. So in small companies, we generally have only this level of deepening. In large companies, we might have more details. We might have a deeper structure of cost centers. So in terms of general management, again, we might recall the functions that we have just seen. So production, administration, and sales. So the general costs and incomes related to general management could be split into three main elements: production, administration, and sales. Generally speaking, in small companies, we have this level of deepening. In large companies, we might have more detailed indications, meaning that within production, for example, we might have a cost center which is linked to the stores, another cost center which is related to maintenance, another cost center which is for process 1, and another for process 2, and so on. So again, we have activities and sub-activities. If we are able to identify sub-activities which are relevant in terms of incomes and or costs, we might concentrate all these costs and incomes within these sub-activities. The same for administration, which is split into finance and personnel. The same for sales, which is split into domestic, export, and service. So again, for each activity, we might have different sub-activities, and for each activity and sub-activities, we have specific costs and specific incomes. By definition, by construction, the horizontal sum of these costs and incomes equals to the general management costs and incomes, as well as the total costs and incomes of each area of each activity equals the sum of this vertical structure of sub-cost centers. So we've seen so far the organization chart and the overhead cost centers. Both the organization chart and the overhead cost centers might be considered as the inputs for the factory and administrative overhead costs, meaning the non-labor costs. So the first stage is to identify the cost centers. So if we consider the combination of both the organizational chart and the structure of the cost center, we might be able to relate some organizational units to some organizational activities and to identify what are the drivers of the economic activity which is carried out in that unit. To this extent, it's possible to assess and taking in account the absorption of resources, costs, and the effective utilization of such resources, which are the income. Second element is to identify overhead cost categories. So again, as all the costs in the company, also the overhead costs might be identified in terms of their nature. They might be identified in terms of the estimation of the overhead costs. So once we have identified the categories, it's possible to have measurement tools in order to estimate the costs themselves. And the last element of this part of the analysis is to include overhead costs in production and operating costs. So the assumption here that we're estimating the labor cost and the other overhead costs in order to have a more reliable idea of what the investment could imply in terms of costs and revenues. Now, since we have explored the area of human resources management and overhead costs, it might be more clear that within the technical analysis, which is the topic that we are dealing with, we might refer to several stages or several phases of analysis when it comes to product and production. So we've seen during our past classes that we can be very specific in terms of identification of the product characteristics, in terms of specification of the technology that we're referring to, and in terms of additional costs like maintenance and so on. When it comes to personnel, which is very important for the project implementation, it's crucial to estimate the costs related both to the preliminary moments, which is the recruitment of the personnel, as well as the dismissal of the personnel during the project itself. A second element of attention should be related to the fact that, as we've seen, if we consider different geographic areas, the different cultural values which are present in different areas might impact on our policy of human resources management. To this extent, it might be understandable why some specific solutions in terms of policy and management might be very effective in a geographic context and will be totally ineffective in another context. Underestimating the impact of such elements could be very detrimental for the project itself, since it might lead to an estimation of cost which is not realistic, which is not adherent to the reality of the project itself. So it's everything for this part on human resources management and personnel's impact on the project organization. In the next two classes, we will deal with other elements related to location and site and the environmental impact of the project. For further information and deepening, as usual, please refer to our website. Thank you.